Thank you, Etienne, and thank you, our guests. My name is Henry again. I am a social entrepreneur. I founded a company called Tusafishe, and Tusafishe purifies water for large communities. But I want to begin my story from the start. After school, I worked professionally with 2 companies before I joined SINA. One of the companies was an international charity, and the other one was a water company. I think that my background, growing up from a very humble family, has affected my profession a lot. So when I was working at this water company, I felt like the company was so much about profits, about the money, like Saida was saying in her story. So I told one of the directors that we needed to create a system that can provide safe water for large communities, especially in rural places. And he told me that that did not make any business sense because the communities I was thinking of didn't have the money to purchase such systems. And he told me it would also be very expensive to create a system like that. I think that is where I left that job. At least my heart left the job. And I started thinking of doing something better. It was also around that same time that a friend of mine and an old boy from my high school told me about SINA. SINA was at that time looking for an accountant. So I applied to go to SINA and become an accountant. The first year, that was 2015, I did some accounting. But thanks to self-organization, the scholars could also do some accounting. So I gave them the small tasks to do in accounting so that I go and involve myself in other things that I found more interesting. At that time, the team was revising the empowerment concept. So I got myself so interested in the part of character development. And together with another facilitator, we created the content of character development, which was at that time called confusion stage in the empowerment stages. And now I think it's called applied social innovation. Now, after creating the content, we also participated in delivering the content. When delivering the content, I realized that I was learning more in delivering the content, as opposed to being the teacher who's teaching. I think that is also because of how it is delivered in SINA, that the role of the person delivering is really the role of a facilitator. It helps you to learn from the people that you're delivering this content from. So I started finding more joy in doing work like this, instead being with the scholars and training them and coaching them one-on-one and things like that. And slowly I started releasing my accounting role. But also I realized very soon that now I had more time to create other things that I had always wanted to create. I remembered the water purification system that my boss had told me was very expensive to create, and that did not make business sense. Because at SINA, I had been inspired by the young people that I saw, some of them coming from places like refugee camps, and some of them didn't have half the education I had, but they were doing amazing things after going through the process. So I knew that with the experience I had, I was going to create this that I had wanted to create. So at that time, I talked to one scholar. At that time, he was not yet a scholar, but I knew that he had some skills that would help to create the company that I wanted to create. I talked to him about it. He actually finally became a scholar at SINA. So I talked to him and we started working on this. By June, we had registered Tusafishe, which is the company now that purifies water for local communities, large communities like schools and also in refugee camps. But we didn't have the money that we needed to create a prototype. I realized that the SINA itself had the same challenge we were trying to solve. They didn't have reliable access to safe drinking water. So I asked if we could get a budget for us to create a solution for SINA. And SINA was willing to fund that. For them, they needed a solution, but for me, I wanted a prototype. So we created our first prototype at SINA in November of 2017. And that prototype has been used until recently. We are just upgrading it recently. We started upgrading it. So that is how we created Tusafishe with the support of SINA. And then I continued working for Tusafishe on half-time basis while I was still working with SINA, training the scholars and working as a life coach until 2020. That is when I decided that I take Tusafishe to the next level. I go full-time in Tusafishe. So unfortunately, in 2020, Corona happened. When I wanted to take Tusafishe to the next level, that is when Corona also happened. And one of our biggest client was the schools, and the schools were closed in Uganda for 2 years, 2020 and 2021. So it was a big blow to Tusafishe. At that time, our team had just started forming, and after the lockdown, it was not easy to bring us back. But somehow, still, in 2022, we managed to provide water to 34,000 people in 17 communities, amidst the struggles that we were going through. And Tusafishe has been steadily growing. But like I was told from the beginning that the business I was doing didn't make business sense, I realized that it is true if you are purely for business, it does not make business sense. It is because of the time that I spent in SINA that I learned, I think I became more resilient to go beyond the needs for finances, to look for creative ways to move forward. I think all these are things that you pick around SINA when you are around SINA, how to use the resources that you have to continue moving forward. So, yeah, so I started, the reality hit me that it is going to be hard to continue building Tusafishe on the model that we are providing safe water to people who don't have the money. Our system costs about $800, and for a community that does not have money, to raise $800 once is really very difficult. We have been thinking about how to change this model so that we can get more market. And we came up with a new model. And this is how this model, before I explain the model, this is how the model came. So one day I am at a school and I tell the head teacher to purchase this system. At that time, we were still selling the systems at $600. And she said, no, $600 is a lot of money. And then I told her, I asked her, how many students do you have? And she said she had 1,000 students. So I told her, you ask your students to pay about $0.8 each, and then you have the system. And she was like, yes. And she said, I am actually going to ask them for about $3. And that is when I realized, oh, so if we actually put this burden back to the scholars, it becomes cheaper to this individual student, but then it can give us more impact. So we decided to create a technology, and right now we are working with some people here in Uganda and in Nairobi to create a software that is going to be integrated with the hardware to allow students to subscribe for water before they go to school. Before, in Uganda, there is something called mobile money. It's a very popular way of making transactions. So we want to create this software so that students, when they go back at home, the parents can pay using mobile money. They pay only maybe $0.8 for the whole term, which gives that child a particular amount of water. So the mobile money will generate a code for the student. And then when the student goes to school, every time they insert this code in our system, it gives them maybe 300 milliliters of water every time they want to drink water throughout the term. And in that way, it is going to help us to even have recurring income, in recurring revenue, and it will grow our impact in different places. But after growing Tusafishe to the level where it is, I remembered that I got all this from SINA. And then I wanted to go back and give back to the community that gave me all that I have now. And after the lockdown was lifted, I decided to start volunteering to go back and train the scholars in applied social innovation at the confusion stage, where I also met SIDA. And every 3 times in a year for about 3 weeks, 1 week being physically there, and then the rest of the week online, I go back to train these new scholars at the Social Innovation Academy. And I normally tell them that the reason why I'm going there is for my own profit, because I'm going back there to reconnect with the principles that made me, and just to pay back to the community that gave me a lot. Thank you so much for listening to my story.